Thank you. I appreciate it. So I have the lucky opportunity, and I have had the lucky opportunity since 2008, to really do what my passion is, which is to figure out why and how people do what they do for good. When we started, our goal was not to just care about the number of people that give to a cause or raise their hand, but we really wanted to figure out the reality behind the behavior we see. I mean, I'm sure some of you are involved in some of the best causes in the world as well, and you might be questioning yourself, like, how come that one got so much attention and not ours, right? I'm sure you're in boardrooms and thinking, how can we make our cause go viral and do all of those things? Well, that's kind of the space that I've been in over the last, I would say now, 6 or 7, 8 years or so. Because I think that there's one thing of understanding that we have to remember is that how we behave doesn't necessarily mean that's our belief all of the time. And sometimes when we believe things, it doesn't necessarily mean we behave that way either, right? I mean, who wants to be healthy and then yet we kind of maybe not be healthy in the end, right? So what I'm going to do today is explore what I've learned over the years about how and why people do what they do for good. Some of the social movements that we've seen occur. And I think what will be maybe interesting to you is the reality behind the activity, because we come at all of this stuff from a very personal place, and you'll probably see some of that personal things in the discussion today. But the better that we know why somebody does something for good, or why somebody does something in the way they behave, it's going to be easier for you as a creative individual to create the things that inspire that action. At the end of the day, doing good is very sexy and popular. It really is. I will tell you, it will rank off the charts in any perception and attitude study that we have ever done. But then in reality, not everybody acts upon that, right? Not everybody does everything that they could possibly do for good. And so the more that we can inspire people to move interest into action, enables all of our missions in our communities, all of the work that you do, so much more important. So that's today's exploration. I want to begin by this picture here, and yes, that is me. That's me and my mom. So my parents decided to do the one thing that most parents do when all of their kids start to leave, and that is downsize. And they started to downsize, and at that moment, they wanted to move into a new house. And of course, I was not around to get all of the things that I had in my room. And so I come home for Thanksgiving one year, and I see this box in there. And on the box, on the front, it says, trash or give it to Derrick, right? This has maybe happened to you too, right? So I open up the box, and I see this image here. And it's an old newspaper clipping from the Breeze Journal in Southern Illinois, where I grew up, a town of 1,000 people. And I read the headline underneath it, and it says, Derrick and Annette Feldmann signing up for Hands Across America in 1986. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I found it. I've found the reason I do what I do, right? So I sit down with my mom, and I say, Mom, this is incredible. This explains why I'm so passionate about figuring out why people that you were involved in this. And she's like, did we do that? And then I said, no, this is not going as planned, right? I was expecting Derrick, this beautiful story about hunger and poverty and how she is there and now she is here, right? The typical story we read about. So I said, well, Mom, why did we go? Because there's a couple things that you should know. I grew up in Southern Illinois, and Hands Across America that year, if you're not familiar, was really the Ice Bucket Challenge in 1986. We Are the World was the song that came out of this. A human chain of people from one coast all the way to the other. And that chain was a representation that we were going to fight global poverty together. They had about 16 million people doing that activity on that singular day. And in there, we had to travel about an hour and a half because the chain was actually going through right on Interstate 70. And so we were about 2.5 hours south of that, where I grew up. So I said, Mom, there was a reason, right? You were so passionate that you got in the car and drove an hour and a half. I'm like, why did you do it? Because you love hunger? She's like, no, I don't. Hunger is hunger. And I said, well, why? And she said, because it felt like the right thing to do at the right time. That's an interesting statement, because how many of you have done things because in that moment it just felt like the right thing at the right time to do, right? Nobody called you, and in that moment right before it, you never planned to do good or do actions, but in that moment it inspired you to say, I better do something rather than do nothing. And that's a very different position, because my mom actually didn't care as much about hunger as I would think that the Hands Across America movement thought that she did. I mean, she was part of the chain, right? So on paper, my mom looks like the best constituent in the world. She looks like she's a great donor. She brought her child to come do this, but in the end, my mom went on with her life, and hunger was never even something they've donated to or been a part of ever since. So when we think about the way people get involved, we have to remember that at times when we do activities, something starts to kick in. It's the other people that are around us that inspire us to do actions that we never thought that we could ever imagine doing by ourselves, right? She finished the sentence by saying, all of our friends invited us to it, and it felt better than not a part of it. I didn't want to say to my friends, I didn't want to go, and seemed to be the person that didn't care about the issue that was going on. And then I said, well, so that means all of our friends cared about hunger, right? That's the logical thing next. And she's like, no, I don't think they cared either. They just wanted to join hands with everybody else. I'm like, this is the worst story that I have ever heard, right? My whole upbringing is now changed. But people do participate in movements, whether they're a creative movement or anything else. We're inspired by other people's stories and the way that they move us from one place to the other. Now, sometimes it doesn't necessarily mean that we believe in it. My friend Matt, 3 months ago, invited us to a fundraising auction and dinner. How many of you have been to one of those? All right. So my wife and I are driving down from where we live downtown to Indianapolis, and we looked at each other, and I said, you know what's going to happen in there, right? And she goes, yep. She said, there's going to be a story, and it's going to be very emotional, and people are going to give. And I said, you got it. And I said, now, this is not in our giving plan today, right? And she said, yep. And we're high-fiving. We're all good, and we're in there. So we go inside, and we sit down, and cue emotional story. And by the way, I'm the worst participant in those situations because I kind of have seen it happen before. And I sit down, emotional story happens, and all of a sudden I look and I hear my wife, and she's sniffling. And I'm like, oh no, wheels are falling off. And I look over again, and the story is over, and my friend Matt, in that moment, stands up and says, who's going to be with me to give $200 right now? And of course, my wife bends down and gets her checkbook right out, and we did it. And I said, wait a minute, do you not remember the conversation? We were all, and she's like, yeah, but you know what? It was a sad story. How could we not do it, right? Unfortunately, at times in our space, whether you believe something or not, our empathy inside of us can kick in. In that moment, it did. This was a hard concept for me because as somebody who has been taught that every single gift somebody makes should be well thought out for the community. I mean, I have a master's in philanthropy. Somebody told me all of the time that everything I should be doing should be thoughtful. But in reality, we have thoughtless behavior all of the time. I mean, how many of us give at the checkout lane when the cashier says, will you just give an extra $1? And how many of you had that planned out in your financial planning throughout the year? Nobody knew they were going to do the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge until the moment it happened. Empathy happens, or when we see, unfortunately, a refugee, a picture of somebody in suffering that's in front of us, and we say, I should do something rather than do nothing at all. And as somebody who studies the methods of how somebody goes from inaction to action for good, this is a step we can't ignore because empathy is built in with every single human being. Now, the challenge with empathy is keeping people in empathetic states isn't a long-term solution for most. Because we can use empathy to inspire emotion, but we have to help them move that emotion to deeper care. And that's essentially where the role of a fundraiser, a marketer, a volunteer, anybody can make that happen. I, like you, were probably a little shocked about this ALS thing. I mean, think about it conceptually, right? Somebody will pour a really cold bucket on the top of me. This is not an ideal situation for most of us, right? But when we were starting to study and for the book that I had written, we were trying to understand, why did people really do this, right? Why would you go out and actually perform this action? Was there a deep love for ALS, right? Very similar to how my mom, did she really love hunger? And when we talked to people, what we discovered is that there was no deep love for the issue. There was a deep love of the people involved in it. It was good to belong. It was good to belong. In our space, and doing good, you have to remember that the brain is always operating in the path of least resistance all of the time. How many of you may have Googled the first week of January, lose weight but don't do anything, right? Your brain's saying, I want you to be healthy, but I really want you to have that dessert to satisfy you as well, right? And each and every time, even when the empathy starts in, right? Some of you will sign petitions this year, but you will never actually go out and get your hands dirty for that cause. Because your brain's saying to you, go out and at least raise your hand in show of support, but it's completely okay if you don't get your hands dirty. We're not there yet. It's all right. But guess what? It feels better if you did it versus not doing anything at all. We have a lot of people that belong to the concept of doing good and to causes and organizations, right? I always like it. I'll go into a board meeting. Sometimes they'll say, Derrick, we have 15,000 followers in Facebook. How come we don't have 15,000 donors? And I'm like, well, it just doesn't work that way, right? Because we belong. It feels good to belong to issues and causes. And it feels worse at times not belonging either. But that isn't the actual state that drives the social action that we need in doing good. That's not reality. In reality, we have a different population that actually believe in the work that needs to be done for something. We have a group of what we call believers. It's so interesting to see this. I don't know if you know, we have a political election going on right now. But in that political election, there's two narratives that typically are used by most politicians. The first one states, here's a policy, and you either like the policy or you don't. Or another positioning message statement will sound something like this. If you believe in this, if you believe in the opportunity that exists for others, then we should be together. This is the same thing of why nonprofits struggle in the creative messaging that they have. In the space where there's so many causes and so many things that are going on, there's no way that the general population takes a thoughtful approach and says, well, because you run better, or because you have a bigger building, or because you have more people, that you are the organization I am going to choose. Choices are made by people and causes based upon how the organization makes them feel and what they believe in. Your customers and everything else, no matter how great your features and benefits are, your usability and all that other stuff, the way you make them feel before and after they do the product or good or service or make a donation is the inspiration that brings people to do more. Standing up and creating, and if you work for a cause, I highly recommend moving to statements where you can help people believe in something and not just show a feature of your program work. Because every single cause believes, whether it's we believe that third graders should have financial education, or that we believe every person in Indianapolis should have this right, because no matter how old you are, or how young, whatever demographic you come from, we all can share common beliefs. And then the third one. We discovered that in movements, there are people that will own issues all of the time. These are the ones that they're your best friends that are always telling you to go do something for this cause, right? They're self-organizing. These are the best people out there because they've mastered the ability to move beyond what an organization tells them what to say, and they create their own. They own it. They truly own it. But you can't own it until you believe it first in order to say, I believe it and can create my own narrative from there. So remember, do you really want people that just belong to your stuff? Do you want my mom? Or do you want people that are willing to go out there and self-organize? And trust me, we're always going to have those three levels. Know when you need to ask those different types of people to do something for you versus not. We belong, we believe, and we own the movements. imagery. Which kind of led me to my next thing. Well, how and why? I mean, what was it about the message that gets people to do what they do for good, right? How do we move this sexy idea of helping other people to really make it happen? Now, when we see an image like this, several different things. I bet we could take a survey right now, and some of you would have many different responses to the types of story that you could create from this. Some of you will talk about the water. Some of you will talk about the environment. All of those things. What's great about this image is that you can create whatever story that you want to believe it to be. But in the end, you can still bring people together to care for that issue or that cause or that thing that we want to do. The best messaging isn't presented on the features and benefits of how doing good is so important. The best messages are out there that present opportunity for donors and the community to stand up for people that need your help. And in fact, we'll find messaging in our research using phrases like, "Are you in?" "Here's the opportunity to," and "Here's your chance," have higher reactions than, "We're a nonprofit organization that we do 3 things. We empower the community, we are innovative, and we do whatever." That language is just a bunch of garbage, to be quite honest. People want to move, and the only way to move them is presenting them with opportunity, not knowledge that they cannot understand or decipher from there. You have to remember that about the goods and products and services, because basically what we want to do is read, witness, and feel. We want to feel as if we can truly do something for somebody else. Now, this is a little challenging because in the nonprofit space, this is how our traditional marketing has worked. Donors over here, and then the organizations over there. And I'm sure some of you that work for causes that are in the room, you want the donor to say exactly what you want them to say all of the time. How many of you have provided the 3 bullet points, the talking points, to everybody? We'll give that to board members and volunteers, right? You're always said, "Here, when you're out in public, here's the elevator pitch." I think the best scenario one time I had is I was with a board that I was on, and I remember the board chair said, "Here are the 3 things I'm supposed to tell you about us," and then read all 3. Who does that, right? And how many of you, especially in a place where doing good is so personal, want to be told how to feel or believe in something when you can't do it yourself? So we don't want, I know we really want our donors to work for us. We want everybody to do that. But in reality, today's message requires the donor and the organization, in which that all that we want people to do is shout their own narratives about the work that we do. The organization is essentially the platform. You are going to create entities. Whether you create products or services, you really need people not to regurgitate what you want them to say, but talk about it in a way that makes it for them. Because here's the thing about cause in particular. When a person acts for good, it reinforces the belief each and every time. When I buy that brand, it reinforces my belief in the product and good that I have, or the interest I have in it. So when you expect people to just have their own experience for you in the way that you want it, we tend to see the groups move further apart. So language like, "Give us money," "Help us out." This isn't about us as the organization. It's about you helping that person over there. That's who we should be focused on. We need to work through our organizations and not for them. Create that message to believe in that helps somebody go into a new narrative. And what's interesting, too, that we found is that symbols can unite people all of the time. This symbol is actually really old. Now, regardless of what has happened now, for a while, this thing united a community of people far more than we ever saw in other issues, especially in the disease space. Or we'll see things like this, where all we have to do is begin to let pieces happen and be presented in front of us. And sometimes we can even alter symbols just at a time when it's necessary to get things passed, even though we may know its history, or we can create our own ideals with it too as well. Symbols are an opportunity. Things are an opportunity for people to share common beliefs. And guess what? Each of us could probably create our own narrative today by just showing those 2 symbols, or that symbol in front of us. So symbols can unite beliefs, and it can inspire us to do even more good. Which brings us to when we allow people to truly own the issue. This image was first presented in Toronto, now 6.5 years ago. It was on a busy street corner in one of the busiest sections of Toronto. And this was the only thing that was up there. That was it. You should know that Dove had no nonprofit associated with it. It had no C3 ideal with it. It was to start a social conversation and a new narrative about what it means today and what beauty really is. The greatest thing about this image is that every person in this room can create their own story with it. And when you start to interview people and say, what does this mean? They'll say to you, that reminds me of when I was in 5th grade, or how I looked or I was challenged, or seeing my sister struggling with being overweight, or having all of this too as well. That's the beauty, and you know when you've captured it, when the community can create their own narratives that they can believe in. 2 years ago, Dove finally created the Dove Fund to raise money for that as well. They didn't need to. They let the image itself. Or we even allow people to create their own images and create their own messaging. Love accepted everywhere. That's the best part about social issues, when we let people go and create their own stuff. We let them become owners of our messages rather than directing them all of the time. So create a narrative that allows anyone to master the movement themselves. No one wants to feel like they're just out there, but they do want to feel that you support them. Give them the platform and they'll do amazing things. So I want to end with 2 primary concepts here. One is, what did we find with the people that lead the movements? What was so exciting in our research that we discovered? And 2, what I finally discovered about the reality of causes in general. On social movement leaders, I had a chance to spend time with Scott Harrison, with Charity Waters, to all different types of groups, to say, you have to tell me, what was it about the work that you did that got you to the place that you are in right now? And all of them were with people right from the beginning. You all will lead causes and social issues and product design and do all of these things. We will lose touch a lot. I was just with a group this week in Pittsburgh, and one of the assignments we gave them is to actually go talk to somebody that gave $10 recently. Think about it. We let those people, we'll be giving them a direct mail or an email solicitation, and we never truly understand what it means to be a $10 giver. And guess what? There are some people that give $10 that believe they gave $10,000 in their heart. And when we don't pay that kind of attention to them, just think about how that feels for them too as well. The second one is, at some certain point, you have to make a big critical decision to remove yourself from the thing that you've created to allow other people to own it. And that's very hard. It sounds so much easier than it's really done. I remember when I was interviewing one, he said, the group wanted to go this way, and I wanted to fulfill the vision I had. And it was a selfish point of view, and so I stepped down. It's not what I thought where we would go, but that's where the best thing that happened for our issue is when everybody else took control. You'll have to figure out a time when you're going to allow yourself to be removed from the important things that you create. Third, we have to have some sort of outcome. I realize that social issues and causes and all of our good work will take a while to solve, right? I always love the messages that say, like, end world hunger tomorrow, right? Like, well, technically, but you do have to have an outcome. Everybody wants to know, especially in the do-good space, 2 things. One is that if I give you something that I value, not just money, my time, my skill, the people around me, if I give you my network of people, that you're going to work, you're going to do something with that. And I don't want you to report back to me 12 months later in an annual report. I want you to tell me 2 to 3 weeks later, just that you're starting to do something with what I gave you, that it meant something to you as much as it meant something to me as well. And so as we look at this, create a way, even if the things that you have to create in the space of doing good will take 12 to 16 months to realize, every month help people understand how their gifts and their assets and whatever they gave matters today to them. That's a really good, important point. This is going to sound kind of funny, You can't master technology and bringing people together if you can't honestly have a conversation with somebody offline as well. The best thing, and even like Charity Water and Scott said to me, we are looked at one of the best organizations in the world because of everything we do digitally. But nobody really sees what we all did behind the scenes to figure out how to talk about this to our friends and non-friends. The people that, quite honestly, are going to give us that authentic reaction to our work. And if we can master it in that short piece, there's no way that we could master it online. But today, because online is so there and so opportunistic, we completely jump to the online space and then try and see if we can figure out there to then go back to the offline space. But human relationships, that ethos and that empathy, we should be spending more time helping and doing it offline first. You have to, in the early stages, build believers. Your friends and your family is a great group, but quite honestly, they're just a bunch of belongers to whatever that you're going to do. If you sold refrigerators tomorrow, they probably would buy one, just because they love you. That group you need. You need them when you want to really spread the message. But in the beginning, you need people that truly believe in your work, and you need those people to act on those beliefs for you. And you need some owners. If you're always going for people to just sign up for things and all of that, ask yourself, do we really have people that believe in the work that I'm doing? And if you don't, you have to go out and get them. Every single movement that we studied, they had a core group of believers and owners, then decided we had enough momentum to get our belongers together and then go viral. Virality took years to happen. The story behind the poster is, when you see the tree, you see all the beautiful things, but it took years to grow that thing underneath. In all of the social movements, we think virality happens in a minute. It doesn't. It actually happens over time. They spent years developing grassroots networks to say this moment in time is the time when we want to get our belongers together and make our believers spread the message even faster. Prepare for that moment. That's the thing that goes viral, not just some crazy video just really quickly about something. We have to be authentic in everything that we've done. There's a story of an organization that we typically profile, and it's called Liberty in North Korea. They're doing North Korean refugee resettlement. It's a hard mission, right? And one of the times they sent this email out, and I'm sure you have all thought that if you work in the nonprofit space. It was the last email for a person who signed up to raise money but didn't do anything. And it was a breakup email. It said, and it literally had a heart on it, should we break up? And then it goes through, you haven't done anything. And after that, and guess what? There was a lot of negativity that came with it. And how they turned it around is they said, you were right. You were absolutely right. That message was horrible and it was disrespectful, but it doesn't change the belief that we have that we need to help a North Korean person get out. Because belief statements can overcome those even when you're wrong too as well. Connect via empathy. We all have it built within us, but don't stay there. Don't stay there all of the time. The pictures and the sad stuff, everybody wants to help opportunity all of the time. And if you think about the good work that you do, people want to help things in the future, not for things of all the great things that you had in the past. And then lastly, we have to make this work about others. The best job we have as marketers and creatives is to elevate the narratives that people create for themselves around our issue. When you go out and you hear people talking about the wonderful work or how that issue is affecting them, that's the story you share. Not my program director went and helped somebody today. No, it should be, this is the reason why this person cares so much. Because we can all then create our own narrative from there. So essentially, in all of the things that we have, we'll always have a collective group of people. Some of those will be belongers, some of them believers, but in reality, the best people are those that own it and create the narratives with us. So here's what I've discovered through the years since I've started doing cause research and all of this work. I used to think that nobody should be doing anything for good unless it had a meaningful, direct impact on community change. And I have since changed that thinking. Because I realized that doing good is as much about helping somebody else as it is about helping myself think about where I want to do and where I want to go. and that every time I do an act for somebody else, it is self-fulfilling, but it also brings me closer to the things that I care about later. Young people will be criticized for just liking things or slacktivism and all these kinds of stuff that goes on. And let the people talk about that. Because when you do that, or when I do that, it means in that moment I at least thought about doing good, which is better than doing nothing in general. So, thank you.